Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dominaria United Limited Set Review. Today we're going to be going over the rares. There's a lot of them, so it'd be a bit more of a lengthy episode. We have 60 different rares to go through. I will be covering the mythic rares in a separate dedicated section just because it's so many to go through. But if you haven't already, check out the playlist that I have up above me here, going over all the different colors of Dominaria United, commons and uncommons. I would recommend starting with the white, as in that episode I go over my methodology to grading, and that's helpful for the context of these episodes. So without further ado, let's jump into the rares. Up first we have Adarkar Wastes, or really all the different pain lands. These are lands that you can tap to add one colorless, or you can tap to add one of two colors, and then it deals 1 damage to you. There's a set of 5 of these. It's white-blue, white-black, red-green, blue-red, red-black, and green-blue. It's not all the different color pairs. It's the ones that seem to have the most kicker abilities that they provide in this set. And these are more likely to be the color pairs that you'll be falling into, although I do think that all 10 color pairs are viable options. I will state that if you heard those colors, there is one color that is appearing 3 times, and that's red. And I think red is one of the more powerful colors. It just looks like in the common slot. So my early spoiler, I think, is that red would be my prediction as best color, but it's hard to tell until you actually get into gameplay. And we will in later episodes go over more of the high-level overview of the set in general. But let's go through the remainder of the cards. These are the best lands there are. They are still just lands that are not extremely high picks, but I'll give these a C+. Up next we have Plaza of Heroes. You can tap it for colorless. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color, but spend that only to cast a legendary spell. You may tap it to add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control, and as we saw before, there are a lot. All the multicolored permanents are legendary. And then 3 and tap to exile Plaza of Heroes. Target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So this does have a lot of bells and whistles, but in Limited, your mana base is poor, and you want the ability to, right out the gate, without any conditions, be able to spend colored mana the way you want to, and this doesn't provide that. So whenever it doesn't, it makes me a bit wary about having a land that can't provide that, and I think this does enough to make it playable, but I will give this a C-. Thran Portal, it's a gate land. Thran Portal enters the battlefield unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. As Thran Portal enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. Thran Portal is the chosen type in addition to its other types. Mana abilities of Thran Portal cost an additional 1 life to activate. Alright, so you kind of have like a worse City of Brass here that can come into play tapped. It's nice that it can be any color you want it to be, so it doesn't have that restriction of the previous card that we saw. But it does still have a cost to have to choose that up front, that you can't change it down the line. And it's not as good as the common lands that come into play tapped that allow you to have either color, whatever you want. So while I'd take this, in their place, I still don't consider it as powerful. Now, it is an earlier pick up front, because when you don't know your colors, this is a better pick. But once you do know your colors, I think the others are a better pick. I'll just give this one a C. Up next, we have Evolved Sleeper. It's a 1/1 human creature. With pay a black, Evolved Sleeper becomes a human cleric with base power and toughness 2/2. 1 black, if Evolved Sleeper is a cleric, put a death touch counter on it, and it becomes a Phyrexian human cleric with base power and toughness 3/3. 1 black, if Evolved Sleeper is a Phyrexian, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then you draw a card, and you lose 1 life. So this is an efficient creature that grows with the game. I like that. I don't love the amount of mana you need to ramp this up to make it good, but it is a great option to eventually sink mana into this and have it grow over time. And when you get to the point where you can put a +1/+1 counter on this and draw a card every time that you pay 3, that makes it a good card. So it's not busted, but I do think it's good along the way at all points. And so this gets a B. It's a solid pull in the black for me. Up next, we have Academy Lore Master. Pay blue for a 2/3 human wizard creature. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player may draw an additional card. If they do, spells they cast this turn cost 2 more to cast. So 2/3 for 2 is a good base rate. I don't love double pip still. The ability is useful, but it helps both you and your opponent, and paying 2 more to cast cards is a pretty big cost. That said, in addition, you're often playing your spells on your opponent's turn in blue, and that's what kind of offsets this equal balance. I would try to pick up counter spells after picking this up, but this doesn't draw me into blue quite yet because of that balance between both of you, so I just give this a C+. It's a solid card. Up next is Guardian of New Benalia. For 1 and a white, you get a 2/2 human soldier creature with Enlist. Whenever Guardian of New Benalia enlists a creature, scry 2. Discard a card. Guardian of New Benalia gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. We've seen these kind of 2-mana indestructible white creatures where you discard a card before, and they're pretty powerful. And this one is no exception to that. In fact, the fact that it even has Enlist and can scry you to better cards makes this quite good. I'm in for that. This is a pull into white for me, and this I would give a B. Up next, we have Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, green and blue for a 2/1 Fairy Rogue legendary creature with flying. Whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, you may copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy. This is a great rate. A 2-mana, 2/1 flyer. I like it. It does have the both colors, but that's fine. There's not enough spells that target creatures to really beef them up. That brings us up much of a grade for that ability, but I do like this as a 2/1 flyer with some upside for 2, so I'll give this a C+. Up next, we have Jorah, Ageless Innovator. For blue-red, you get a 2/3 Human Artificer legendary creature. Tap it to put 2 Ingenuity counters on Jorah, Ageless Innovator. Then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of Ingenuity counters on Jorah. This is essentially a 2/3 for 2. That's a good rate. But the artifacts will come up every now and then. But as we looked at the artifacts before, there wasn't a whole lot that really impressed me on the artifacts, besides maybe that 3-mana, 3/2 Scry 2 creature. So the upside will happen every now and then, but mostly this is a 2/3 for 2. I'll give this a C. Up next, we have Leaf-Crowned Visionary. For green, you get a 1/1 Elf Druid creature, where other elves you control get +1/+1. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay green. If you do, draw a card. There's not enough elf support to really make this much of a thing in Limited. It will come up, but if you'll look, each of the different ones have like 2 commons that are of their type, and honestly, the main creature bases for them, those are pretty weak. Like the elves, I think, are pretty weak, for example, but that kind of exists for all the base creatures. The +1/+1 is helpful, but really, I think it's the whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay a green. If you do, draw a card. When that comes up, it makes it really good. But I don't think it'll come up enough to make this a high pick. I would just give this a C. Remember, it's not really good to play bad cards just to make some of your other cards better. So a C this is. We have Llanowar Loam Speaker. For 1 green, you get a 1/3 Elf Druid creature that's tapped to add 1 mana of any color. And you can tap to make target land you control become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until end of turn. It's still land, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a mana dork that I like. The stats are okay as a 1/3 for 2, but ramping into more mana on turn 3 is good. This doesn't do enough to pull me into green, but I do like this as a solid card. I think this is a C+, and it is nice that you can get a 3/3 land creature when you need it. C+ it is. Up next, we have Quirion Beastcaller. For 1 green, you get a 2/2 Dryad Warrior creature. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Quirion Beastcaller. When Quirion Beastcaller dies, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Quirion Beastcaller. Alright, so this is a card that pulls me into green. It's a fine rate as a 2/2 for 2, but it'll be easy to grow quickly and consistently. Even when it dies, its power still stays around in the form of distributing the +1/+1 counters. I like this a lot. It's not overpowered though, because order does matter here. Later in the game, this is not as good of a card. This is really a card you want to get down on 2 in order to take advantage of the creatures coming after that to pump it up. So I'm sticking with a B on this, but it's a good creature. This is a B, a pull into green. Up next, we have Radha's Firebrand. For 1 and a red, you get a 3/1 human warrior creature. Whenever Radha's Firebrand attacks, target creature defending player controls with power less than Radha's Firebrand's power can't block this turn. Has domain 5 and a red. Radha's Firebrand gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control. Activate only once each turn. So this is a 3/1 for 2 where I don't mind the 1 toughness. That's a fine rate to begin with, but the fact that this can't be blocked by a creature with power less makes this fairly well unblockable. It's not that all creatures, it's just some target creature can't block it, so we're not going to get carried away with this. The domain ability to make +2/+2 will come up reasonably as well to make this unblockable by more and more creatures, but this isn't quite a pull into red to me. It's just a strong red card. This gets a C+. Rundvelt Hordemaster. 1 and a red for a 1/1 goblin warrior creature. All other goblins you control get +1/+1. Whenever Rundvelt Hordemaster or another goblin you control dies, exile the top card of your library. If it's a goblin creature card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. There's not enough goblin support for this, and the effect is much worse than the elf version that we saw. You need a lot of goblins in your deck. I really think that these cards are targeted at constructed. This card just gets a D from me. Up next, Shadowrite Priest. 1 and a black for a 2/2 human cleric creature. Other clerics you control get +1/+1. Pay 3 black, tap it, sacrifice another cleric. Search your library for a black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So most of the time, this is going to be a 2/2 for 2, but occasionally you get a great creature onto the battlefield. I like that. I do think that this is just a solid C, because you have to sacrifice more clerics to get it, but it's a good ability tacked onto a 2/2. C it is. Up next, we have Silver Scrutiny for X blue. It's a sorcery. You may cast Silver Scrutiny as though it had flash. If X is 3 or less, draw X cards. This is one of the best pure draw spells we've seen. It's nice that it has the flexibility to be available based upon your mana. The more mana, the more cards you can draw. This is playable, but not a high pick. I'll give this a C-. Up next, we have Sten Paranoid Partisan. For white-blue, you get a 2/2 human wizard legendary creature. As Sten Paranoid Partisan enters the battlefield, choose a card type other than creature or land. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. It has 1 white-blue to exile Sten, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. I wish this didn't exclude creatures from having your choice of card type. But it's okay, for instance, in sorceries in blue. It still doesn't impress me. I think this is just a C. Up next, Stronghold Arena. For 1 and a black, you get an enchantment with kicker green and or white. When Stronghold Arena enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life for each time it was kicked. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value. I like drawing cards, but at the expense of this card, needing to hit the opponent and losing so much life, it's a lot to ask. It's a playable, but the jury is still a bit out on this one. I'm just giving this a C. We'll see how it plays out. Up next, we have the Raven Man. 1 and a black for a human wizard legendary creature. It's a 2/1. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, create a 1/1 black bird creature token with flying, and this creature can't block. Pay 3 and a black to tap and make each opponent discard a card. Activate only as a sorcery. That's a lot of mana to pay to have to tap it and then make the opponent discard a card and only do it as a sorcery. It'd be much better, but kind of broken as an instant. But, you know, this is still a reasonable 2/1 creature for 2. I still would like to get better than this for the mana. I think I'm going to give this a C-. Up next, we have Urborg Lehurgoyf. For 1 green, you get a star/1+star creature with kicker, blue, and or black. As Urborg Lehurgoyf, tongue twister, Urborg Lehurgoyf enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards for each time it was kicked. Urborg Lehurgoyf, that is quite the tongue twister. Their power is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to the number +1. This creature will be a 3/4 for 3. Sometimes it'll be a 6/7 for 4, and it grows with the game. It is just a big creature, but it's a good one. With that, I think this is a B. It pulls me into green. Up next, we have Valiant Veteran, 1 and a white for a 2/2 core soldier creature. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1. 3 white, exile Valiant Veteran from your graveyard. Put a +1/+1 counter on each soldier you control. This is mostly a 2/2 for 2 with a bit of an upside. I'm not impressed by it. I think this is a C-. Up next, we have Voldalian Hexcatcher. For 1 and a blue, you get a 1/1 Merfolk Wizard creature with Flash. Other Merfolk you control get +1/+1. Sacrifice a Merfolk. Counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. I like that you can flash this in and sacrifice it right away in order to counter a non-creature spell from your opponent as long as they don't pay 1. It's limited in the late game, but it's still playable. I give this a C-. Up next, we have Aether Channeler. For 2 and a blue, you get a 2/1 human wizard creature. Whenever Aether Channeler enters the battlefield, choose 1. Create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. Return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Or draw a card. A 3 mana 2/1 that can draw you a card or bounce something or could make a 1/1. Any of those conditions makes this a good card. The fact that you got the versatility to choose what you want to do is great. This is a solid B, and it's pulling me into blue. Up next, we have Anointed Peacekeeper. For 2 and a white, you get a 3/3 human cleric creature with vigilance. As Anointed Peacekeeper enters the battlefield, look at the opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Spells your opponent's cast with the chosen name cost 2 more to cast. Activate abilities of sources within the chosen name's cost 2 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. Alright, so a 3/3 vigilance for 3 is good enough as is, and one that will definitely slow down your opponent because you'll choose what they would probably want to play next turn. It makes it a really good card. This is a B. It pulls me into white. Up next, we have Braids Arisen Nightmare, 1 black for a 3/3 Nightmare legendary creature. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. It's nice to get a 3/3 for 3, and it's nice to put your opponent in a trade situation when you want to. That's a good amount for 3 mana, and I'm going to give this a B. Up next, we have Haughty Djinn. For 1 blue, you get a star blue Djinn creature with flying. Haughty Djinn's power is equal to the number of instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This is almost always going to be above rate, and it's great to make cards cheaper on top of that. I'll give this a B. It pulls me into blue. Up next, we have Keldon Flamesage. For 2 and a red, you get a 2/3 human shaman creature with Enlist. Whenever Keldon Flamesage attacks, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is Keldon Flamesage's power. You may exile an instant or sorcery card with mana value X or less from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. As a 3 mana 2/3 with Enlist, this is good. The fact that it can allow you to play a spell for free and must be answered or you can do so repeatedly is huge. This is not a bomb due to the delay of the effect, but this is a B+. You'll notice often the breaking line to get to a B+ or a bomb scenario is whether the card gives you card advantage and it is inherently a good card by itself. Well, this covers that test. This is a B+. Up next, we have King Darion the 48th. 1 green-white for a 2/3 human soldier legendary creature. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. 3 green-white, put a +1/+1 counter on King Darion and create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. You can sacrifice King Darion, and creature tokens you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. You're getting more power and toughness out of this than the rate. Alright, so it's a good base card. It's nice to have a token maker mana sink, even though it's expensive to pay 5 for that. The fact that you can attack with your tokens and keep them surviving will also come in handy sometimes. All around, this makes it a good card. This is a B. Up next, we have Llanowar Green Widow. It's a 2 and a green for a 4/3 spider with reach and trample. It has domain 7 green. Return Llanowar Green Widow from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It gains, if this permanent will leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each basic land type among lands you control. At its base, this is above rate creature. A 4/3 for 3 is excellent. It also has reach and trample on it. And the fact that you can recur this again makes it a great card. This also passes that test of being card advantage and great at its base rate. This makes a B+ for sure. Up next, we have Meria, Scholar of Antiquity. For 1 red-green, you get a 3/3 Elf Artificer legendary creature. Tap an untapped non-token artifact you control, add green. Tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control. Exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. Note that you can't play lands or sorcery speed effects off of this while it's your opponent's turn, so just want to call that out. It's nice to turn your artifacts into mana dorks, but like we said, there aren't too many of those floating around, so with that, this is mostly going to be a 3/3 for 3. I'll give this a C. Up next, we got Rivaz of the Claw. 1 black-red for a 3/3 Viashino Warlock legendary creature. It has Menace. Tap it to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast dragon creature spells. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard. Whenever you cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard, it gains, when this creature dies, exile it. This is a fine creature as a 3/3 for 3 with Menace. This plays nicely with Dragon Whelp, which is the uncommon dragon that we saw earlier. It doesn't pull me into it, but C+ it is. Up next, we have Squee, Dubious Monarch, 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature, Goblin Noble legendary creature. It has haste. Whenever Squee, Dubious Monarch attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. You may cast Squee, Dubious Monarch from your graveyard by paying 3 and a red and exiling 4 other cards from your graveyard rather than paying its mana cost. This is a fine rate, 2/2 plus a 1/1 that comes on out for 3. It's fairly expensive to make it come back, but it's doable to do. This pulls me into red. I think this is a B-. Up next, we have Temporary Lockdown. For 1 white-white, you get an enchantment. When Temporary Lockdown enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until Temporary Lockdown leaves the battlefield. This is only good when your opponent is using cheap creatures and tokens, so therefore I see this only as a sideboard card. Threats Undetected. 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to 4 creature cards with different powers and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards. Shuffle the chosen cards into your library and put the rest into your hand. This is a much better divination. Pay 3, draw 2. Because you're drawing good cards. It does hurt that the opponent picks the 2 best cards and puts them back into your library. But this does enough to be a playable. I'll give this a C-. Up next, we have Vodalian Mindsinger. For 1 blue, you get a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard creature with kicker 1 in a red and or 1 in a green. Vodalian Mindsinger enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it for each time it was kicked. When Vodalian Mindsinger enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature with power less than Vodalian Mindslinger's power for as long as you control Vodalian Singer. A 5-mana 4/4 steal something with flexibility of being used earlier is a good card. The only thing that keeps this from being a bomb is the creature goes back to the opponent when this dies. So with that, I'm only going to give this a B+, but a B+ is a very strong card. I'm definitely going to be pulled into these colors for this card. Up next, we have Archangel of Wrath. 2 white for a 3/4 angel creature with kicker, black, and or red. It has flying and lifelink. When Archangel of Wrath enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to any target. When Archangel of Wrath enters the battlefield, if it was kicked twice, it deals 2 damage to any target. This is a bomb. A 4-mana 3/4 flying lifelink is excellent rate. The fact that it can shock something for 1 more mana as well within 1 card, and it can effectively turn into a Flame Tongue Kavu dealing 4 damage to something, or even splitting it up for an additional kicker of 1, makes it a great card. It takes me a lot to be able to say something is an A, and it basically needs to necessitate that you're starting to run away with the game, and then an A+ is like almost unbeatable cards. So this doesn't pass either of those. There are ways around this, but it is a bomb. This is an A-. Up next, we have Astor, Bearer of Blades. For 2 red-white, you get a 4/4 human warrior legendary creature. When Astor, Bearer of Blades enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Equipment you control have Equip 1, and vehicles you control have Crew 1. We haven't really seen vehicles yet, so they're not common here. But the fact that this can get equipment and is still a 4/4 for 4, I think brings us up to a C+. So I'm going to give this a C+. Up next, we have Defiler of Flesh. For 2 black, you get a 4/4 Phyrexian horror creature. It has Menace. As an additional cost to cast black permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost black less to cast if you pay life this way. This effect only reduces the amount of black mana you pay. Whenever you cast a black permanent spell, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains Menace until end of turn. Changing all black mana on permanents for the option of Phyrexian mana is pretty good, and it's good on a 4/4 Menace, which is already a great rate, and the fact that this causes creatures to be able to get +1/+1 and gain Menace until end of turn is also very nice. I'm giving this a B-. It's a good card. I could see myself coming up to a B for this down the line too. But the +1/+1 Menace until end of turn wasn't quite enough to kind of take me over the edge. B- it is. Up next, we have another Defiler. You'll see there's a series of these Defilers for each color. So we have Defiler of Instinct for red. It's 2 red for a 4/4 Phyrexian Kavu creature. It has First Strike. As an additional cost to cast red permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost red less to cast. You pay life this way. It only reduces the red mana. Whenever you cast a red permanent spell, Defiler of Instinct deals 1 damage to any target. Alright, so this is comparable to the previous creature, obviously. First Strike I like better than Menace, and I like its ability better as well. Red really does want to pick off the last couple of life from your opponent, and this is a way to do that. This could also pick off quite a few creatures along the way as well by playing red spells, so I think this is better. This one puts me to a B for this card. Up next, we have Drag to the bottom, 2 black for a sorcery with Domain. Each creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. I'm still not a fan of board wipes. Likely, you'll put this in your deck to reset the board when you're losing, but the fact that it also hurts you makes me not love this card very much. I'll give this a C-. Up next, we have Urtai Resurrected. For 2 blue-black, you get a 3/2 Phyrexian human creature legendary creature. It has Flash. When Urtai Resurrected enters the battlefield, choose up to 1. Counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Its controller draws a card. or destroy another target creature or planeswalker, its controller draws a card. I don't like that your opponent draws a card with this, but getting a 3/2 and for free, basically countering anything or killing anything, that's a good amount of flexibility and a decent trade-off. I give this a B-. Up next, we have Golden Argosy. For 4 colorless, you get a 3/6 legendary artifact vehicle. Whenever Golden Argosy attacks, exile each creature that crewed it this turn, return them to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. It has crew 1. You'll need some enter the battlefield effects before you want to use this, otherwise it's not that good. I would call this a build around C-. Namada Primeval Warden. For 2 black-green, you get a 3/4 Treefolk legendary creature with reach. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. You may pay a green, sacrifice a sapling, and give this +2/+2 until the end of turn. You may pay 1 to black, sacrifice 2 saplings, and draw a card. You should be able to get a decent amount of 1/1 saplings with this, and turn them into draw a card when you want it. And it's also hard to kill this when you can pump it up so much. It's also just a decent rate for a 3/4 reach. I think this creature is a B+. I really like that you get a good solid card and you can get card advantage from it. It passes that test, B+. Up next we have Rada Drabik of Urborg, 2 white black for a 3/3 zombie wizard legendary creature. It has Vigilance and Ward 2. Other zombies you control have Vigilance. Whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. I'm fine with Vigilance and Ward 2 on a 3/3 for 4. The legendary item will sometimes come up. We saw there were a lot of legendary things, and I think that brings this into being a pull into these colors. It's not an extremely strong one, though. I'll give this a B-. Up next, we have the Elder Dragon War. For 2 red, you get a read-ahead saga. The first chapter's Elder Dragon War deals 2 damage to each creature and each opponent. The second chapter is discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. And the third chapter is create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying. This has so much flexibility to it. At the very least, you're getting a 4/4 flying for 4, which is a good rate. You can get draw a card with it by discarding lands with Chapter 2. And you can also wipe the board when you need to of small creatures. So, depending on what you want to do here, you have a lot of options. All that combined, I think, makes this a B+, so that's what I'm giving it. The Phasing of Zhalfir. For 2 blue, you get a saga with read ahead. First 2 chapters are the same. It's another target non-land permanent phases out. It can't phase in for as long as you control the Phasing of Zhalfir. And Chapter 3 is destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token. So it's nice that you can phase things out for a couple turns. It's still a board wipe that hits you, which means I don't love it. What brings it up is the fact that you can phase out your own creatures to protect them from being destroyed. And, that way it's not a board wipe for you necessarily. But you're leaving yourself vulnerable while you have those creatures phased out before the board wipe happens. So this doesn't pull me into blue, but I'll give this a C+. Up next, we have Danitha, Benalia's Hope. For 4 and a white, you get a 4/4 human knight legendary creature with first strike, vigilance, lifelink. When Danitha, Benalia's Hope enters the battlefield, you may put an aura or equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to Danitha. My god, this is usually a 4/4 for 5 that has first strike, vigilance, lifelink, but that in itself deserves a B+. And the fact that sometimes you can tap get an aura or equipment card on this, and it has the 3 abilities that you want for equipment that can increase its power, it makes it a good card. It doesn't pass that bomb test, but this is a very strong card. It's a B+. Up next, we have Defiler of Dreams. For 3 blue, you get a 4/3 Phyrexian Sphinx creature with flying. As an additional cost to cast blue permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost blue less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect only reduces the amount of blue mana you pay. So it's the blue version of that Phyrexian mana creature set that we saw. Whenever you cast a blue permanent spell, you may draw a card. Okay. That is a really good rate for a 4/3 flyer, and especially when it goes unanswered, it becomes a bomb. I'll give this an A-. Up next, we have the white one, Defiler of Faith. 3 white for a 5/5 Phyrexian human creature with vigilance. It has the Phyrexian mana for white. All right. Whenever you cast a white permanent spell, create a 1/1 white creature soldier creature token. Alright, this is not as good as the rest of the set for Defilers. The fact that I just get a 1/1 white creature whenever I play a white permanent spell, I'm not overly impressed. It doesn't make it a bad card. Just the fact that this is a 5/5 Vigilance creature for 5 that can give you the Phyrexian mana option is good, but I'm just going to give this a B. Up next, we have Defiler of Vigor, the green one, for 3 green. You get a 6/6 trample. It has the Phyrexian mana option. And whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Okay, so now I still feel even more bad for the white one. Yeah, I don't know why they didn't give white more. 6/6 trample for 5, great. Phyrexian mana option, great. Whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I'm in for that. I think this is an A-. Up next, we have Serra Redeemer, 3 white for a 2/4 angel soldier creature with flying. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, put 2 +1/+1 counters on that creature. So a 2/4 flyer for 5 is a bit under the rate that you want. And you need to cast your 2 mana spells after using this in order for them to get the pump. So not a huge fan of that. I still think this is a pull into white, but barely. Hopefully you can make a lot of tokens late to help this out, but I'm going to give this a B-. Up next, we have Temporal Firestorm. For 3 red, you get a sorcery with kicker 1 in a white or 1 in a blue. Choose up to X creatures and or planeswalkers you control, where X is the number of times the spell was kicked. Those permanents phase out, and then Temporal Firestorm deals 5 damage to each creature and planeswalker. Alright, so a board wipe that does immediately the board wipe and saves your creatures. I like. It's a bit expensive and not guaranteed to wipe everything, but it's pretty close. This is a B or B+. I'm going to start with B+, though. This is so far my favorite board wipe of the set. The Cruelty of Gix, 3 black for a read-ahead saga. Chapter 1, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a creature or planeswalker card from it. That player discards that card. Chapter 2, search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle and you lose 3 life. Chapter 3, put target creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. While I don't love each mode individually for 5 mana, as you get more modes, this becomes good. I'm usually at least taking mode 2, if not mode 1, but it's good to have the flexibility if you need board presence right away to be able to immediately go to Chapter 3. The versatility of this card makes it good. It can effectively be a 3-for-1. I will give this a B. I like my 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s, etc. to take more effect right away. That's why I'm not going higher, but a B is a solid card. It'll definitely pull me into black. Up next, we have Urza Assembles the Titans. For 3 white, we get a read-ahead saga with Chapter 1, Scry 4. Then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a Planeswalker card, it is revealed this way. Put it into your hand. Chapter 2, you may put a Planeswalker card with mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. Chapter 3, you may activate the loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers you control twice this turn, rather than only once. I'm just going to call this an F. I think it's our first F. This is purely a constructed card. They make those. Up next, we have Briar Hydra, 5 and a green for a 6/6 plant Hydra creature with trample. Whenever Briar Hydra deals combat damage to a player, put X +1/+1 encounters on each target creature you control, or access the number of basic land types among lands you control. A 6/6 for 6 with trample that can pump up your creatures down the line is a pull into green. It's still a big beefy creature that I can't go too high up for, but I like that it has trample. I'll give this a B-. Up next, Chaotic Transformation for 5 and a red. You get a sorcery with exile up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target enchantment, up to 1 target planeswalker, and or up to 1 target land. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller reveals from the top of their library until they reveal a card that shares a card type with it, puts that card onto the battlefield, then shuffles. If you're really looking for removal, this will do in a pinch. But I don't like that removal gets replaced, especially for 6 mana. This is often better targeting yourself to get a better permanent, but you don't control which permanent you get. All this said, I don't think this is reliable. I think this is a D. Cosmic Epiphany, 4 blue for sorcery. Draw cards equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. When you need a draw spell, this will do, but I don't like expensive draw spells in Limited. This is better in Sealed than in Draft. I'm going to give this a D+. Up next, we have Leyline Binding. For 5 and a white, you get an enchantment with Flash. It has Domain. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control. When Leyline Binding enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Leyline Binding leaves the battlefield. This is basically a 4 mana remove anything spell. It can pull me into white, but not by much, so I'm giving this a B-. Up next, Ragefire Hellkite, 4 red for a 5/3 dragon creature with flying. Whenever Ragefire Hellkite attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, Ragefire Hellkite gains double strike until end of turn. This is strong. A 6 mana 5/3 flyer is fine, but tack on the option for double strike, and it becomes good. You need to spend, or your opponent will need to spend removal on this in order to get rid of it effectively. I think this is the B+. Up next, we have Tyrannical Pitlord. For 4 black, you get a 6/6 demon creature with flying and trample. When Tyrannical Pitlord enters the battlefield, choose another creature you control. The chosen creature gets +3/+3 and has flying. When Tyrannical Pitlord leaves the battlefield, sacrifice the chosen creature. So this is a lot of power. It does kind of suffer from the whole when you're winning, win more, when you're losing, lose more type of effect, which is bad. But sometimes this will win on the spot, and it's a good rate for a good creature. I think this is a B+. Up next, we have Herd Migration. For 6 and a green, you get a sorcery with Domain. Create a 3/3 green beast creature token for each basic land type among lands you control. It also has 1 green, discard Herd Migration. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, you gain 3 life. Alright, I like this flexibility. The 1 green, discard it to get a basic land card in your hand, gain 3 life. That's usually how you would want to be using this card. But it is nice that later in the game, when you have 7 mana, you can go ahead and play this and get a good board presence out of it. I like that flexibility. With that, I won't say it's a pull in a green, but this will be a C+. And that is the full review of all the rares. Up next, we'll do the mythics, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.